The Legislature today is provided by
West Virginia University, a land-grant, space grant, R1 research institution. Learn more at wvu.edu.
Good evening from the Capitol building in Charleston. I'm Suzanne Higgins. On the legislature today, a major broadband bill passes the House of Delegates. Tonight, a special report and follow-up conversation on broadband expansion. But first, some highlights from other news today at the Capitol with senior reporter Dave Mistich. Dave, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks.
There was a resolution in the House today, House Resolution 13, calling upon the Attorney General to investigate the business practices of Electo.
Right.
Tell us about that. Of course, it has to do with the hospital closings.
Right. So the way I understand it, they also ran a hospital in Wheeling, the Ohio Valley Medical Center. News yesterday broke up in Fairmont that the Fairmont Regional Medical Center was closing very suddenly. So the House, it seems very quickly, got this resolution together calling on the Attorney General to investigate their practices. Of course, this is non-binding, and just a simple request. It is the will of the House to request the Attorney General. But anyway, House Resolution 13 went up for a vote and was passed, or was adopted today.
It did pass overwhelmingly. The vote was 94-4 with 2 absent. Only delegates Bibby, Graves, McGeehan, and Wilson voted no.
That's
on
right.
that.
And I did reach out to Delegate McGeehan, and he responded very simply. He said, "Look, this is just a private business that hasn't been able to sustain itself here in the state. Why should we be investigating him?" A very simple argument there, but of course he was one of 4 votes against the resolutions.
And we understand that the governor got involved with lawmakers for a face-to-face.
Yeah. I was walking down the hall of the Capitol earlier today, and Delegate Mike Caputo of Marion County, that area right there where Fairmont is, and I understand that Senate Minority Leader Roman Prezioso and Delegate Amy Summers, the Majority Leader over there in the House, all traveled with the governor up to Fairmont today. So they were, I guess they had been delayed with floor sessions going on, but eventually they, broke away and got to head up to Fairmont. So
these are 600 jobs. It was discussion in committees this morning. I was listening to the Senate Finance Committee, and Senator Maroney of Marshall County, also the chair of the Senate Health and Human Resources Committee, said that there may be a bill originating from his committee, the Health Committee, that seeks to hold companies accountable if they leave, if they close, and they don't stick to their closure plan.
Yes, sir.
Every company has a closure plan. What do you do with the patients should your hospital need to close? What happens to the incentives that local communities offered, that the state offered? And so we may be seeing that yet this session.
right.
Also, this morning, there was a public hearing on House Bill 4176, the West Virginia Intelligence Infusion Center Act. Tell us about that meeting.
Right. So, there's a lot of concerns over civil rights here. One particular citizen, West Virginian, Rob Cornelius. Most folks that are paying attention to West Virginia politics would know who Rob is. He's the now ousted chair of the Wood County Republican Executive Committee. He's got a lawsuit ongoing about his removal from that. All of that aside, it's my understanding that Rob's wife, who works here in the building, was approached last year by the governor's general counsel, and Rob is of the understanding that he was being surveilled by the Fusion Center. The way I understand this Fusion Center, they're supposed to be watching for potential terrorist activities, to work with law enforcement, but they were gathering intelligence on him. We'll listen to a clip right now from Rob Cornelius during this public hearing on House Bill, was it
it's 4176, and let me just say real quickly, it seeks to put the Intelligence Infusion Center was created by an act of the governor 12 years ago.
And this would just put that in the state code. But anyway, back to this. This is the clip from Rob Cornelius from the public hearing this morning.
According to Kirk's testimony last week, the Fusion Center cannot gather intelligence on someone or something that is not under investigation. Further, any intelligence cannot leave that facility unless there's an open case. As rewritten, HB 4176 would actually hand out criminal charges, fines, and penalties for someone who did leak that sort of information. Those are all Kirk's words, not mine, from that transcript. There's a greater issue with internet and electronic surveillance by the current executive of his employees, state employees, and citizens more generally. Beyond concerns of Fusion, I would encourage those interested in our civil rights to examine the current and former roles of employees of the governor's senior staff and their scope of duties and activities.
And Suzanne, of course, state officials with the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, which is the department that oversees this fusion center at the moment. We should note that there's a bill that would sort of rearrange that particular department, but for the time being, that's where that fusion center sits. They disputed that they were ever surveilling Mr. Cornelius, and we'll take a listen to Tom Kirk. He's the deputy secretary of that department and also general counsel over there at DMAPS.
One of the things that we do at the Fusion Center is any information that comes in there is vetted to see whether it's factual or not. I can tell you that if that is what Mr. Cornelius said, that's false. I can vet that right now. He's, to my knowledge, has never been investigated by the West Virginia Intelligence Fusion Center.
And of course, this public hearings today, the Judiciary Committee started working this bill earlier this afternoon. They, were working through some changes, and then it got moved to the foot of bills, I believe. So it's going to be sometime this evening that they, either decide to pass that on or take a vote on what to do with that bill in the House Judiciary Committee.
All right. Also in the House today, a medical cannabis-related legislation that you've been reporting on passed the House. Tell us the significance
So I think it's
of that.
Senate Bill 339. It's a rules bundle from DHHR. We've talked about it a couple times. Basically, it adds flower or dry leaf cannabis to the state's medical cannabis program. So if you talk to anyone that is an advocate for medical cannabis, they will tell you that patients say they want dry leaf or flower to either smoke it or ingest it otherwise through food, through edibles is what they're known as. But that bill was amended in House Judiciary and now goes back to the Senate to concur. There's another bill over here that's coming out through the Senate that would essentially do the same thing, add dry leaf or flower, but it would accomplish that in just a slightly different way. But those bills are moving, but that one Senate Bill 339 coming back over the Senate, so if they concur, that'll be taken care of. So
Great. Dave Mistich, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today was History Day at the Capitol with all its traditionally colorful displays. Randy Yohe reports participants say it's about sharing our rich Mountain State heritage with the world.
The Sons of the American Revolution Daniel Boone chapter is one of 13 such West Virginia bands of pioneering brothers. New member Andrew Bragg says he joined to keep the Mountain State's overshadowed revolutionary zeal alive, dressing the part as an historic inspiration.
The fact that we get to interact with the public and hopefully maybe inspire the next historian to come out and learn about their family and about the history of West Virginia, that in and of itself is enough reward for me.
West Virginians take great pride in their musical heritage. This year's West Virginia Music Hall of Fame inductees include Mountain Stage founder and host Larry Gross, and mainly from Pocahontas County, the Hammonds family, who many say played and sang the ancient repertoire back in the early 20th century better than most.
Mountain music was very popular. The old Scotch-Irish fiddle tunes, which is what the Hammonds family is responsible for keeping alive and passing down from generation to generation.
Among the History Day exhibits, the West Virginia Sons of the Confederacy and United Daughters of the Confederacy. The sons say they highlight ancestry work. The daughters volunteer, and both do public service.
It is our history, even though it's Confederate.
The ancestral Cabell County plantation home of Confederate General Albert Gallatin Jenkins was once a living history destination, now in disrepair and shut down by the Corps of Engineers, to the dismay of the local Green Bottom Society. So here they are facing heritage challenges and answering history's call. I'm Randy Yohe for the Legislature Today.
House Bill 4015, a broadband enhancement bill, passed the House of Delegates today. Emily Allen will discuss broadband expansion with lawmakers in just a moment. But first, her visit to Calhoun County to learn how student achievement is impacted with and without broadband access.
I think our schools right now have pretty good access to broadband internet. We have 200 meg internet to both of our elementary schools. Calhoun County Middle High School has 500 meg internet. Right now we're struggling to keep up with the infrastructure of those things, having access points that are fast enough, deteriorating networks and switches and things like that need to be upgraded, and those things are very costly.
When we visited Calhoun County last fall, Tyson Price was wrapping up his tenure as IT and curriculum director for a school district of roughly 1,000 kids total. Calhoun County is, like most of West Virginia, quite rural.
You know, you come home and you try to bring your work home, and there's times it's just you can't get that done. My wife or myself would have to either stay at work or go somewhere else just to be able to get on to our laptops or her laptops and my iPad just to get work completed.
Every day, Michael Fitzwater heads to the school where he's in charge of facilities and transportation. He can't do a lot of the work from home, he says, due to lack of internet access.
I cannot check temperature or change temperatures in school settings to where if I had, the correct internet speed, I could log on to my phone or computer to check temperatures or change or adjust temperatures. But I just, those things can't happen here.
Fitzwater and Price say it gets worse for the students, whose day-to-day existence depends on technology if they want to keep up with the rest of the country.
It really is a major hindrance for student learning. When we were growing up, the times have changed, the landscape of school has changed, and homework looks different now. And every curriculum that we bring in as a school system has an online component, whether it's an instructional component or whether it's resources that they do online, but they're only available at the school, and a lot of those things aren't able to be accessed at home, and that's unfortunate. I think that's selling our students short with that.
A lot of upperclassmen at Calhoun County are trying to get ahead with dual enrollment classes through Glenville State and Marshall universities. This is Cole Jarvis, who is taking 2 college classes at the time of this interview. Jarvis spends about 2 hours a day on the related homework.
The internet here is actually very well. I can run my college courses here. However, when I go home, even though we pay such a large portion for the internet, it is very slow still. And it continues to say it doesn't respond when I try to do college courses. It can run very small websites, but not larger ones.
Most local teachers have adjusted their curriculum when it comes to assigning internet-related work. Jarvis wishes college instructors would understand this too.
It doesn't matter if your internet's slow. It's your fault if you don't keep up. So when the internet's slow and I can't use it, or I don't have access to it, it's my fault for having assignments turned in on late.
Junior year student Carter Ritchie agrees.
There's some real kids that you may be hurting their future. They need scholarships. They want to get these courses done now, especially since it's cheaper to do college courses in high school. Bad internet really does affect us. It's just not us wanting to goof around on the internet, watch videos, and play games with each other. I'd hope it would change. I really would hope, because I'd love to stay here. I love the scenery. I love all my friends there. I'd hope all my friends would stay, but they would be moving too. I mean, being able to go to college and having good internet at the house, doing courses at home, it's not really available.
Ritchie is gearing up to take college courses next year. He likes coding and says he'll probably want to do that professionally someday. But if the situation doesn't improve in Calhoun County or West Virginia as a whole, both students say they may not stay.
Internet would be more of a convenience to have. As of right now, I probably would not stay in Calhoun County if there wasn't the greatest internet here. I would think I would leave, because I do want to run a business one day when I get through college and have a better life.
As Calhoun leaders work on expanding broadband access countywide, Price says he wishes the state would recognize existing broadband issues at the school. Sure, access is there, but it's costing the state a pretty penny to maintain. Revamping infrastructure and diversifying providers in rural West Virginia might save state dollars in the long run.
They need to understand that the infrastructure of Calhoun County's network in general for the residences in our area, it needs upgraded, and it's not going to happen cheaply. It's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of effort, and there's going to have to be funds allocated for that. There's just no way around it.
A local broadband committee for Calhoun County completed a broadband-related survey in 2019. Now that they have some data, the committee is in the process of seeking grants to help attract more internet providers to the area and funding assistance for infrastructure construction and maintenance.
Good evening, I'm Emily Allen. Joining me now are delegates Daniel Linville, a Republican from Cabell County, and Senator Robert Plymale, a Democrat from Wayne County. Both are members of committees dealing with infrastructure, and both are members of the West Virginia Broadband Enhancement Council. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Now, we just watched a video from Calhoun County High School and Middle School. One sentiment that really resonated with me was that broadband access internet was acceptable at the school, but when these students wanted to go home and work on their homework or advanced placement courses, it was a little bit more difficult. In your experience, your legislation, how can counties and communities get ahead with broadband access?
Go ahead. Sure. So I think that probably the first and most important portion is to be able to partner both with the state and our federal partners. And so when we talk about that, we're working on new training that we can do to take advantage of some of the things that the USDA has made available to us, as well as FCC and several others. What we've heard very often is that there seems to be no silver bullet in expanding and enhancing broadband, as they were talking about in your clip there. But so we're going to try silver buckshot this year. And so we're trying to expand via cellular coverage, via even satellite, fiber coverage, and utilizing as much competition as we possibly can. And so through legislation, we're trying to attack that via the regulatory process and also via the funding process.
Senator Robert Plymale, anything to add?
Well, yes, it became very clear in 2016 with the BTOP money and how it was not used properly.
And what was BTOP? Just really quick.
It was the federal government with money that was coming down that the states could allocate. And we did it through one provider. And it was very misused in terms of that. So it came very clear that we had to do something different. And that was the first bill that was done in 2016 that really provided more of an opportunity that not one provider could be used, that we would open up the access to that. And personally, when you start looking at this from the county level into the school level, I think Brad Smith calls them digital natives. The kids that are today are grown up with, something in their hand, and they use their thumbs to do instead of typing like we would do. We did in my age. I'm much older. But quite honestly, that's what we've got to do. We've got to provide the best internet service, and it's got to be done through public-private partnerships. It can't be done with government. Government can't really be doing that. We can only provide and break down the barriers that have been incumbent upon us through the years, and that's what we've been trying to do through the Broadband Council and through legislation. I applaud what the Speaker and Delegate Linville and others have done in terms of breaking down a lot of the barriers through different bills that we've done over the last few years.
Sure, and the last two things you mentioned, Broadband Council and legislation, are some of the next things I want to address. Can you talk briefly about what the West Virginia Broadband Enhancement Council is, how it came together, and what you are working on right now? Whoever wants to go first, I suppose.
Well, I mean, it was statutorily appointed. It was one that was created by the legislature. It really does not have any authority other than what the legislature gives it. We are giving them pretty broad perspectives of saying we want to improve this. Most of this has been done through federal money, though, and it's the allocation of that money to try to go to underserving areas. What we found is every area is underserved, and the way that FCC has reviewed this and looked at it from a standpoint is who has good service. We really don't have good service in every area, and we have to expand that, and particularly as it relates to, let's go to schools in particular. The E-rate program that we've had and run in the past has been used and utilized by the incumbent providers to where...
I just want to ask quick, and it might be hard, but can you kind of briefly explain what E-rate is? What do you mean by that?
E-rate's an enhancement that's been then allocated by the federal government to provide internet service to schools.
So it's more
to
of that
the
federal
counties.
money coming in.
And the money flows through, and incumbent providers use it. So let's take Wayne County as an example. Similar to Calhoun County, we have 2 incumbent providers. They give you and establish a rate that the counties have to give them internet service. We pay the highest rate in the state because of the lack of ability to do that. And you have really very little service. When these students talked about going to home, they have no service. And how can you run a business? How can you run a school? How can you run anything related to that if we don't provide that?
Well, and Bob's exactly right. And so when we look at some of these things, the problem with E-rate currently and sort of the way that business had been done as it regarded broadband is that we would rely on a single carrier. And when that happens, the schools don't have another choice basically to be able to meet all the requirements that they have. But very specifically, as we extend access to our schools and improve the access to our schools, those same lines can be utilized for your businesses and your various homes all throughout the area. And so that's been a very major point of discussion for us and something that we're trying to address, not just through legislation, but also on the Broadband Enhancement Council.
And nationally, we've been looked at by the Pew Charitable Trust as one of the 9 states that have really been pushing the envelope on policy to provide broadband. So I know that Doug at Linville spent last week in D.C. with that. I could not go, but that's a real coup for West Virginia to really be recognized for that. And they're willing to participate with us in the next steps.
Sure. We mentioned legislation in the House of Delegates today, actually, House Bill 4015. We've mentioned it some past. It's relating to West Virginia's broadband, enhancement and expansion. I guess we'll start with you this time. Sure. What does that bill do, and what can we look forward to seeing when that bill goes into effect?
Sure. So House Bill 4015 does a number of things. First and foremost, as we've talked about the regulatory process, we're putting a 60-day shot clock on the various regulatory approvals that are within the power of the state of West Virginia. So we're wanting to expand broadband as quickly as possible.
When you say 60-day shot, what do you mean by that?
So the government and the various agencies of state government have 60 days to make a decision on a completed application or it's considered assumed approved. And so when I say that, right now one of the major issues that we have is trying to expand what's called middle mile fiber. And so that's what all of your various and sundry internet service providers will actually tap into, such that they can give you internet at your home or even at a cell tower site and things of that nature. So it's what you have to have in order to get internet anywhere. And so what we're trying to do is make West Virginia one of the fastest places in the nation. In addition to that, we're working on something called the Advanced Regulatory Environment Analysis, or area maps.
Is that in a bill, or is that also in 4015?
That's in 4015.
Okay.
And so what that essentially does is say there's all these numbers of checks that we have to have in order to run new internet service, and this empowers the government essentially to be able to say, okay, if we were to do a project like this, is there any concerns from the environmental side of things, from historic preservation, from federal highways, and so on and so forth, all the various agencies, so that we know that we've got a clear path forward. And in addition to that, as it regards getting students access at their homes, we're working on really expanding cell coverage and even something called fixed wireless internet. And by doing that, we have the Vertical Asset Management Act that's all part of this bill. And so what we're trying to do with that is to open up the various pieces of what's called vertical real estate, so tall buildings, state-owned towers, and things like that, so that we can put new cell antennas on them, and even the equipment such that if you can see those towers, you can actually get high-speed broadband. And so we're trying to open it up and make West Virginia truly open for business.
Sure.
But remember that getting fixed wire to the furthest point is what you have to do. Before the wireless technologies can play into this, you have to get fixed wire. That's why this middle mile provision
How long
is so...
do we, just not to cut you off, but how long do you think that will take us to take care of, since it sounds like such a long process?
Well, in some states, I know Virginia, it's taken 10 years in some of those areas, and that's really a fast track plan. We have to be serious about this. We have to do it in the next 6 to 8 years.
Well, and I would say that over the next 2 to 3 years, there are projects currently ongoing that will run over 414 miles of fiber in some of the most difficult to serve counties, sort of in the southern part of the state. In the northern and middle part of the state, there's ones for another few hundred miles. And in addition to that, the groundbreaking for the Facebook fiber project, which is middle mile fiber that your internet service providers can tap into, that crisscrosses this state, broke ground, I believe, back in November, if I recall correctly. So there's a lot of good things happening. It just takes time to filter out, and I'm very optimistic as to where it's going, but we're not done, and we will continue to work on this for all the reasons that you showed on your piece there. And just like the Senator was saying, Brad Smith said yesterday, change can happen to you or change can happen through you. And so we're hoping that change will happen through West Virginia and no longer to West Virginia.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Tomorrow on the Legislature Today, our Friday review of the week with updates on many of the stories we've been covering throughout the session. Thank you, Delegate Daniel Linville from Cabell County and Senator Robert Plymale from Wayne County. For everyone here at West Virginia Public Broadcasting, thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.